Since Disney Plus is about to take over all of our lives with the entire Disney library of awesome movies, let's talk about them. Several of our favorite childhood films were nearly drastically different. Sometimes there are story elements that just aren't right. Other times, focus groups just don't respond well to parts of the film that are supposed to be fun. Of course, there are other times when your lead character is a creepy ventriloquist dummy that would scare all children forever. Many of these changes seem obvious now, but were argued over by writers and executives for weeks. So let's dive into the complicated creative process necessary to make a Disney classic. Here are the greatest stories of Disney movies that got changed last minute. If I told you to sing that song from Little Mermaid, you would probably sing Part of Your World or Under the Sea. Both ended up becoming iconic, and two of the most famous songs in Disney history. What if I told you that one of them almost didn't happen? That's right, early test audiences evidently weren't too big on Part of Your World. The studio was pretty sure that kids wouldn't like the song, so it almost got cut. Luckily, they tried it on adults as well and got a much better reaction. The rest is history. So if you love Part of Your World, thank the adults of the 90s for giving you that amazing gift. Though if you hate Part of Your World and are mad at it being stuck in your head right now, blame the adults of the 90s. Though there are so many other things they should be blamed for. Why would anyone think denim overalls were a thing that needed to make a comeback? What a crazy time. The muses in Hercules ended up being one of the best parts of the entire film. The idea to make a classical Greek choir into a modern choir was pretty effective throughout the movie. It's sad to think that they almost went in a really different direction with it. The original idea for the muses was to have a popular female pop group from the 90s do the songs. That's right, they were going to get the actual Spice Girls to do the voices for the muses. Luckily, they couldn't get this idea to work out. Probably because If You Wanna Be My Lover, You Gotta Get With My Gods just didn't fit the Disney brand. Just think, there are probably character designs of this out there. Can you imagine sporty, scary Ginger, Baby, and Posh as a Disney-fied Greek chorus? Yeah, I know all their names, don't judge me. This definitely wouldn't have aged well. That's about as crazy as having Phil Collins sing throughout a movie that's set in the deep jungle. Oh, wait. Name a scene from Lady and the Tramp. No, you're not allowed to say the spaghetti scene. Chances are, if you haven't seen the movie since you were a kid, you probably don't even remember anything else from the film. That's why it's so crazy that the scene almost didn't make it into the movie. Apparently, several people working on the animated classic thought that the dogs looked silly eating spaghetti. Dogs don't have lips, so how could they physically slurp it up like humans do? Turns out that the awkwardness of dogs eating spaghetti was part of the charm. It, strangely enough, ended up being the most romantic scene in Disney history. I also like how this was the movie where they were like, I don't know if this scene's realistic. 15 years earlier, they had a wooden boy get turned into a donkey and back without batting an eye. Yeah, dogs eating spaghetti. That's the weird one. You know the dramatic musical about lions based on the writing of Shakespeare and set to the music of Elton John? That movie was somehow almost an even weirder concept. Apparently, the original idea for The Lion King was to have it be a spoof of a National Geographic documentary. It turns out that they were surprised to learn that lions didn't actually live in the deep jungle, so clearly they didn't read a lot of National Geographic. They decided to move the film to the savannah, and the changes kept coming from there. Maybe they just realized that lions don't do a whole lot of singing and dancing in real life. What's really strange is that the new movie is kind of like both of these ideas put together. While the original animated classic had lots of cartoonish, over-the-top elements, the remake was very true to life. It almost seems like a National Geographic documentary that just happened to catch animals singing and dancing. Maybe instead of scrapping the idea altogether, they just wanted to wait until technology let them do it right. It's also possible that they caught a couple of episodes of the Japanese series Kimba the White Lion. You've got to admit, there are some massive similarities there. I'm sure Disney would never consider stealing from a different studio. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Alright, for those of you born after the year 2000, there used to be these things called VHS tapes. They were kind of like DVDs but bigger and clunkier. There were even these buildings called movie rental stores where you could rent one of these videos for about a week. Sometimes if a movie wasn't good enough to get a big screen release, they would just release it straight to video. It's basically like when a bad movie gets released straight to Netflix. Nowadays, Pixar movies are guaranteed box office all-stars, but that wasn't always so. The sequel that is now famous for being even better than the original was almost an animated short that went straight to video. It's hard to imagine how they would fit the complicated story of Woody being stolen by an evil toy collector into a short. Thankfully, we'll never have to find out because the film got expanded into a full feature. I don't understand the executives who thought A Bug's Life was worth a feature film, but Toy Story 2 was kind of weak. Did he just really love the comedy stylings of Dave Foley? For those that weren't born before 2000, Dave Foley was, you don't care. This may prove surprising, but Toy Story 2 wasn't the only Pixar movie that almost didn't make it to the big screen. The lovable story of Remy the rat wanting to become a French chef was almost a Pixar short. Apparently, Ratatouille was originally conceived as a much smaller story. They decided that it had enough heart to justify expanding into a full movie. This was fortunate because it ended up being the cutest film of 2007. Sorry, Juno. It makes you wonder what other Pixar shorts would be amazing feature movies. I know I would watch a movie about the old guy who plays epic games of chess with himself. Tell me you don't have just so many questions about his life. The film still had problems midway into production. Famed Pixar director Brad Bird was brought in to retool the film around the human characters instead of Remy's rat family. In retrospect, how did they not know this was going to be a winner? It's a story about a sewer rat that runs around a kitchen making food in secret. Actually, I can kind of get the logic on that one. If I asked you what the most expensive animated film was, what would you guess? Fantasia? Frozen? Toy Story? It turns out that it was the moderately famous Tangled. And that's the most expensive one by a long shot. Tangled is a good movie, but is it worth $260 million? There's a good reason why the film has such a bloated budget. They decided in the middle that they wanted to go in a completely different direction. Tangled was originally conceived as a slapstick Shrek-styled fairy tale spoof. It even incorporated elements of time travel somehow. This is starting to sound more like a bad episode of Doctor Who than Shrek. They decided to scrap all that, reanimate it, and do it as a classic princess musical, with songs and everything. Hopefully, the unbelievable ton of money they made off of Frozen, the film that followed the revamped princess trend, made up for it. I'm pretty sure Disney has 90% of the world's money now anyway, so they're fine with one needlessly expensive movie. There are many things about The Little Mermaid that are iconic. The songs, the characters, and the story are all considered trademarks of a Disney classic now. It's so great that it's getting a live-action remake. Looking back, it's hard to think that the story was almost drastically different. One of the movie's most memorable characters is the evil sea witch Ursula. Her plot to cleverly con the undersea princess in order to take her father's power is pretty dastardly. It was almost a lot more like Lion King, though. Ursula was apparently going to be Ariel's aunt instead of just an evil witch. It was going to be similar to how Scar plotted to overthrow Mufasa using Simba. Though Scar's plan was much better than Ursula's. Okay, you're going to steal her voice and eventually blackmail her father? Isn't this entire plan hinging on a bunch of random events that aren't really in your control? Couldn't you have just kidnapped Ariel and achieved the exact same result? I mean, she willingly walked right into your hideout. Thankfully, they moved away from the family angle. It's hard to imagine Triton and Ursula being in the same family. Was their mother an octopus lady and their father a merman? Am I asking too much about the biology of merpeople again? Pixar is well known for making adorable creative works of art. Inside Out is definitely a prime example of this. If you haven't seen the movie, it's about a girl named Riley and the personified emotions of her mind. It's a beautiful way of teaching children about the importance of all their emotions and how to deal with them. Though there was one part of the film that didn't play well with certain international audiences. The scene where about kids being disgusted with the prospect of eating broccoli didn't play well in Japan. Apparently, Japanese children love broccoli and didn't understand why a kid would hate it. This is surprising because in America, you gotta drown it in cheese to get kids to eat it. Actually, that sounds like the most American thing ever. So they had to change broccoli to green peppers for the Japanese release. Have Japanese parents tried drowning green peppers in cheese? It might work. It's amazing that the kids had no problem accepting the weird purple elephant imagery friend, but yucky broccoli was just too far. That just goes to show that kids are weird no matter what country they're from. If you've seen Toy Story 4, you're probably still having nightmares about the freaky ventriloquist dummies in the movie. So you'll be horrified to learn that everyone's lovable pal Woody was almost a ventriloquist dummy the whole time. Early story ideas show that Toy Story was conceived quite differently than what we got. Woody was going to be a creepy dummy instead of a fun cowboy. Buzz was also going to be a cheap wind-up toy named Tinny, because all 90s kids loved playing with wind-up dolls and ventriloquist dummies. You'd think people writing a movie called Toy Story would have done some research about actual toys. At least this was the only time that Toy Story changed something last minute. Oh. Okay, looks like Woody went under a lot of changes before we saw him. I guess that's forgivable considering this was the first ever computer animated movie. You know how Woody is presented as everybody's best friend and the leader of Andy's toys? That wasn't always the case. The original version of the character was much more antagonistic. Of course, he was conceived as a creepy doll, so that makes some sense. Even Tom Hanks referred to Woody as a jerk. For Tom Hanks, that's probably the worst curse word he's used in years. It was reportedly quite the hassle to change the character so much at the last minute. Luckily, the animators and Mr. Hanks managed to pull it off, making him one of the most lovable kids characters ever. The movie wisely pivoted to being more about Woody and Buzz's emerging friendship. They downplayed the whole thing where he sort of tried to get rid of Buzz. You know, he doesn't really come off too great in the released version if you think about it. The whole thing is a beautiful testament to friendship now. So I'm glad they took the time to fix it. Be honest, you still tear up every time Woody and Buzz actually fly together at the end. They did kind of paint themselves into a corner with this one though. If you get Randy Newman to sing a song about friendship in your movie, you kinda have to bring the friendship. So there are the most iconic scenes that were drastically changed. Did we miss any good ones? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to The Binger.